Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to a conversation that we're going to be having with the fabulous Katie Burnett. And of course, I don't know if you can see Sam on the screen, but Sam Wilde is with me also.
I am here.
Excellent. We're off to a good start. So I'm just going to start. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you.
I'm just going to start by saying a few words about how we experience you. And create you for everybody to see you in all your magnificence. And then we're going to dive in. We've got some questions for you, and we just really want to draw out of you your experience of what it's been like so far to grow your coaching practice, and anything really that you want to share about how your life has been impacted as a result of doing the work that has been required to grow your business. So what do I want to share about you, Katie? You came into our world through a mutual friend, and instantly what I would say in my experience was, I want to get a coffee with Katie and get to really know this girl. There was something about you that was just really magnetic. And when I was thinking about you this morning, one of the words that just kept coming up was trusted. And I thought within a second, I would trust you with my life. What's that? Like, how's Katie doing that? And there's just this incredible presence that you have, and this incredible way of being with someone and loving them and caring for them and nurturing them. You see possibility for somebody else, and you nurture that out of them. You nurture them in a way that has them see that. And there's just so much grace to you that it doesn't matter what's occurring in your life. There's this ability to be really present with somebody and love them and serve them. And that's really powerful stance to come from as a coach and as a human. There's so much more I could share, but I want to give you the airtime. And they were the first things that jumped out at me when I really think about my experience of you. So it's a huge privilege to be able to share you with the world. And is there anything, first of all, is there anything that you would like to add to that introduction that you want people to know about you?
Oh goodness, I don't know if I can add to that. I think the thing that jumped out at me when you were just talking, Lisa, was you said there's so much grace that I bring. And in my head, I went straight back to being, I don't know, 8 years old, 10 years old. And I was such a tomboy, and I was always covered in bruises. And still now, there are mornings where I wake up and I'm getting dressed and I look at my knees. I'm like, there's a bruise there. And I've got no idea where that came from. So I think grace is the word that made me chuckle a little bit the most, because it's not necessarily how my body and myself see myself, but I very much appreciate it.
I love that you shared that, because as I was writing it down, that was the one where I was like, I think Katie doesn't see this yet. I think she doesn't see this yet. So it's hilarious that you're actually bringing that up. And there can be grace within a tomboy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So should we get started?
Let's.
Yeah. So you shared with us, Katie, you've said so many cool things to us. And you've shared things like, I feel like I've been sleepwalking through life and I've just woken up. And so much of my life has significantly shifted since being part of this community. So can you just paint a picture for us? We'll go back to the beginning when we met, those initial conversations, who you were coming into the school. So we want to take you back there and just paint a picture for us around what were your tendencies? What were your patterns? How did you relate to yourself? What was going on for you at that time?
Yeah, cool. So I think when we met, I was in a job that I have been in for a while. So I work in events, in the people side of events. So working with both paid staff and volunteers, and I love people. I always have. I love finding out about people. I love hearing their stories. I love hearing what they've been through, what they've done, what their hopes are. But I just felt like I was a bit stuck where I was, and I wasn't getting the same joy and the same passion out of what I was doing each day. And I had all these vague notions of things that I wanted for myself that I think I'd wanted for a while, around owning my time and being more present with my own boundaries and understanding what those boundaries were and being able to articulate them. But there were always things that I think the best way to say it is I kept them in a little box, and I never really delved in too deeply. I knew that they were there, but they never got prioritized. There was other things that always came to the forefront. And I think when we met, and one of the things that I continue to work with today, by no means am I suddenly magically perfect in this way, which is an interesting word to use, was that it was perfectionism. I needed to go in, whatever I did, whatever I wanted to take on, I had to be the best. I had to work all the hours or take on all of the tasks. And if my boss wanted something from me, I would say yes, even if I knew it meant I had to cancel something that was really important to me to get it done, because it was around making sure that everybody else saw how much I was putting in, how much effort there was, how hard I was working. And yeah, perfectionism. Perfect. That was the word that used to kind of flash in my head all the time. And I think that was the person that I was when I first kind of met you guys and spoke to you guys. I was still slightly older than the tomboy that I mentioned, probably about 13, 14 in my head, and still desperately trying to just climb to the top of the class and put in all the effort and put in all the energy. Even if it wasn't something that my heart was truly in, my head was always telling me that was where I had to go.
How has that perfectionist streak got in the way a little bit when it comes to your practice? Like, what did you notice?
The thing I noticed the most was I'd notice things, or I'd see things about people, and I wouldn't necessarily tell them. I'd hold myself back from sharing what I'd seen because I didn't want to upset them, or I didn't want to it felt maybe I was needling in a place that was a bit uncomfortable for them, and I was like, oh, they won't like that, so I won't do that, because then they won't like me as a coach. Where in actual fact, the more I learn to love being just a little bit imperfect, the more I can see that actually it's going into those places and occasionally needling in them a little bit that makes it better. The best way I can frame it for myself is like when you go to like a sports masseuse or something like that, and they find that one knot and they push on it, and the first time they push on it, you're like, oh my God, that hurts. But then once they push on it a little bit more, you're like, oh yeah, it's releasing. And then you're like, oh, now I can move that muscle again. That understanding that actually it's that stuff that comes with being okay with being a little bit scrappy and a little bit messy occasionally. That's the life-changing stuff that you guys have really helped me to recognize and to sit with, and to not even just sit next to, but actually like embrace that side of myself as well.
So can we now start to call you a massage therapist for the mind?
Yeah, that's quite nice. I like that.
Massage, I love it. Katie, there'll be people listening to this who will really resonate with the I gotta get it right. It's gotta be right. It's gotta be perfect. Can you share with us, or expand on what you've already said, like some times where like those insights you've had was like, oh, I don't need to be perfect. It doesn't absolutely have to be right. Can you share some insight around what is it that actually shifted or begun to shift that in you? Because I know you said it's a work in progress. We're all the same. What's begun to shift that in you?
I think it's around when you're young and you're learning about yourself and you're just learning who you are. Unknowingly, I think I've spent a lot of time in that period of my life identifying who I am and sort of building that list of, oh, Katie Burnett, she is, you know, she's a bookworm, she's crafty, she falls over quite a lot and walks into things, all of those things that are on the list of who I am. And then it's like there comes a point in time, and I couldn't tell you when it was, I guess thinking about it somewhere in my early 20s, where I'm like, okay, this is my list now, this is who I am. And then I've just lived with that. And on top of that list has been, you need to be perfect, always, you know, try and be better. And then when I kind of got to a point where I was talking to you guys to begin with, and I felt that stuck feeling, I was like, I need to actually look at myself again. If I'm feeling stuck now, something in me needs to change to make that feeling change. And I think it's that sudden realization of, oh, that list I've got about myself, it's not written down anywhere. It's not fixed. It's not set in stone. I can change that, and I can change me. And that was kind of like, oh, well, then who do I want to be? And I think it's that then coupled with the external stuff around, well, actually, maybe on social media, I don't need to post all the brilliant stuff that I need everybody to be kind of vaguely envious of. Maybe actually what I want to post is, I had a really crap day today, and this is why. And has anybody else had that? Because I'd love to hear it, that I'm not the only one that's going through this. And that feeling of sharing, and I think that's a big thing for the community that you guys have opened up for me, is sharing with other people to go, I've just been through this experience, or I've just said this really daft thing in front of a coaching client, and someone else goes, oh, I did that, it's fine. You feel like an idiot for 10 minutes and then you're fine, you just move on. You're like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one that's done it. But in the moment, you feel entirely like you're an island, and you don't have to feel like that. Those two things put together are like life-changing.
Katie, what you just shared is huge. And I want to make sure people aren't missing this. Because this sounds like, and you can tell me if I'm not hearing properly, right? So you can correct me if I get this wrong. It sounds like there was a moment for you where instead of looking outside, there was an inquiry into, oh my gosh, how am I creating myself to be? Like, what am I identifying with of old and living like that's true? And that sounds like that was the first time really you've knowingly had that click and that realization and gone, okay, what if I recreate myself? Then what happens? And most people will look outside of themselves for change. Mm-hmm. So they'll take the same version of themselves, the same need to be perfect, and change their environment and change their circumstances, or think something out here needs changing, but they'll take that belief with them. And therefore the feeling won't feel that much different. So I don't want people to miss that, because that's what I was really hearing you sharing, was like, I suddenly woke up to, this is an inside job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've been very lucky that I've had opportunities to kind of live in lots of different countries and lots of different places. And I think I was at a point where I was living overseas, and I was thinking, I live this wonderful life and I'm in a place where it's basically sunny all the time. And yet I'm still feeling those same niggles and those same frustrations. And that was when that shift happened. And I went, oh, well, I've been in lots of places and the annoyances have still been there. So maybe I'm the common denominator here. And I need to start having a think about what needs to be different. And definitely that moment, that realization of all those things I've told myself for so long that are totally true in that moment. I'm like, why do I think that they're true? Asking that question was just massive. And I think that's a question that I still, out of everything I've learned, that question, I ask myself that, if not daily, then definitely at least once a week. I'm like, I'll be in a situation and I'll be thinking about how I need to do something. And instead of just going and doing it either how I've always done it or responding to it how it just feels habitual, I'll be like, hang on a second, is that actually true? What's the situation here? And just that step back from just instinct or habit is massive, because you suddenly get this new perception. You're like, oh, that's why that person's behaving like that. Maybe I can respond differently and I'll get something different from them.
Also massive, Katie. And I'm sharing this because I know that some of the work that we've done together is allowing yourself to see the things that come naturally to you. And putting the focus on, there has actually been work to get me to the stage where these gifts now seem like they're natural, but actually I've put the work in to create myself that way. And so what you just shared there, you are taking what you're hearing, you're taking what you're learning, and you're intentional about it. You're practicing it daily. Oh, is that true? You're intentional about your practice of growing in self-awareness. You're intentional about your practice of questioning your repetitive thought patterns. And I don't want people to miss that either. It's important. So this stuff doesn't just happen. There's information, and then we take the information and we actually live it. And you are golden at that. So I don't want people to miss that either. And I don't want you to miss it.
That's not saying that it's easy. There's moments where I either ask myself the question and then get annoyed because I'm like, actually, just doing this the habitual way would be so much easier. Or, I mean, openly with you guys, openly in the school, there's been tears, there's been real, raw, uncomfortable, yucky emotions that come with all of that as well. So I think if anybody watched this and I wanted one thing for them to kind of walk away with it, it would be that it's not so massive that you can't do it. All it takes is like one little shift, and then all of a sudden everything seems really different. Because really asking myself, is that true, feels like a really tiny question at the time, but then huge different perspectives come out of it. And I think it's okay for it to feel a bit hard, or not even just hard, but it's okay for it to feel a bit yucky and gross. And that, working through all of those feelings, it sounds a bit sadistic, but you actually kind of enjoy it after a while. You're like, oh, why do I feel gross about this?
Again, Kate, what a massive turnaround. What a fantastic thing to hear from, because what I think I just heard you say was what I used to see as a problem and something that was really difficult and I used to avoid actually has become an opportunity.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal for people to hear, because I think me and Lisa were talking about this just before the call, how when we talked like this conversation, it's easy for somebody listening to hear, well, Katie was here and now she's here. Good for her. Like, that is incredible. And what we don't want to miss is all the stuff that's happened in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I love what you shared around, this isn't always a comfortable journey. And it can be messy and there's tears. What had you carry on then? If it was messy and uncomfortable, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be doing this. Whatever came up for you, what had you carry on?
I think, luckily, the tears and the really hard stuff for me came after I'd already done a little bit of that work at the beginning. So a little bit of that sitting next to the feeling of you don't necessarily have to be perfect, and what does that mean? And I think spending little incremental amounts of time considering some of those, from my perspective at the time, smaller changes, from my perspective now, huge, massive changes in how I was thinking, but spending some time doing those little bits made me see that incremental change, so that then when I got to a really difficult bit and a really hard bit, or a really yucky, gross, messy feeling, I was like, well, I don't want to go all the way back. I've made these little incremental changes. I've got this far. Let's just see what it feels like. Let's just go a little bit into the gross feeling. And if it feels bad, we'll pull back a bit. And it's just like taking just a few little steps each time. And you don't necessarily have to work through all that horrible stuff all in one go. And in fact, I don't even know if you could. I know for me, there's still stuff now. It's still very much a work in progress, the perfection thing and some of the stories that I tell myself still pop up really frequently, but I can see it happening, and that feels different. That's what shifted. So I don't think that I would have been happy in myself to just go, oh well, it's too hard, let's go back, because I knew I wasn't happy there. So what's the point in going back there? Let's see what's actually on the other side of doing something a bit grim.
What allowed you, Katie? Because I love what you just shared there around, at the time, it felt like they were just little shifts, and now I see the significance. So what allowed you to go there, to be willing to play in that space with us on those things that at the time might not have looked so significant? And there might have been, I know this was my experience when I worked with some of my earlier coaches around there, they would share something and I would say, yeah, but that's not what I want to work on. I want to work on this because that looks important. And they could see that actually working on this is going to make a difference over here. This is where we need to be. So what allowed you to open up to this work in that moment where it was like, I don't know if this is the thing I really want to be working on. This kind of seems small to me. It doesn't seem like it's going to make that much difference.
I think the immediate answer that springs to mind is between you and Sam. You both, you created a space that made me feel comfortable to bring in those things that the big things that I were like, these are the things that I feel like are keeping me in this position that I don't like and I want to change. But then you'd have me, I keep saying sit with. I think that's what I feel like I've learned from you two is I'll have something and it's almost like it's there next to me. And rather than just like needing to deal with the whole thing, because having a whole thing next to you is massive. It's person-sized, it feels big. Actually, what about if you just looked at that person's pinky finger and just dealt with that little bit? And I think between you and Sam, you'd somehow always find a way to ask me a question, to be like, well, stop looking at this huge thing that's creating all this stress and anxiety. What about if you just looked at this thing? How does that show up here? How does that show up at work? Or how does that show up at home? Or how does that even show up on a Monday morning when you're walking the dog? Like, just reframing how I was looking at things then helped me to go, actually, these can be broken down. These don't need to be huge and massive. These can be incremental, and they're like Lego. They're like little tiny bits that you can build into something really impressive. That at the time it's just a little grey block that doesn't look that great. So
what is it that you thank you, by the way, I just want to say that as well. What is it that, because I think this is going to be helpful for coaches who are looking to hire a coach, looking to get some support with some of their scary full persons sitting next to them. And what is it, Katie, that you would say to anybody in that position who is interested in progressing, is interested in investing in themselves? What had you, essentially the question is, what had you hire Sam and I? But I don't mean it about Sam and I mean, like, what was it that allows you to show up in that way, to trust, okay, let's work on the pinky finger? It's like, what would you say to someone about actually the process of hiring a coach and building that trust in that relationship? What would help them?
I think just talk to them. I think in the early stages of us talking, I probably asked you guys as many questions as you asked me. So it was as important for me to get to know both of you as it was for you to get to know me. And I think in having those conversations, I recognized that whilst I think I like both of you as people, I also knew that you weren't going to be afraid to push me when I needed it. I think it'd be very easy to go out there and like meet coaches and you think, oh my God, this person's just like me. It's brilliant. We can have all these amazing conversations and our minds just really meet. And that is phenomenal, but that isn't necessarily going to make you get those incremental development steps, because you need to find a coach or coaches that are going to be willing to be that mental masseuse and push on the muscle that hurts a little bit every now and then. And I think the only way you can recognize whether or not you've got that is to have 2 or 3 conversations with somebody and start to get to know them, and maybe consciously choose. I think for us, I consciously chose when we first showed up to kind of bring that perfectionism, because I knew it was one of the ones that I felt a bit icky and difficult about, or didn't necessarily like pulling out of the box, but I was willing to do it to see how it felt. Because if it hadn't have felt right in those conversations with you guys, or you'd have gone, oh yeah, perfectionism, I've got that too, it's annoying, isn't it, move on, I'd be like, well, these aren't the people for me. So maybe, I think maybe my advice would be choose something that is one of the, not pain points, but your knotted muscles, and that you're willing to share, and just see how they make you feel about it. Do they make you feel comfortable talking about it, or do they actually just make you feel like it's not something to work on? Because if it's important to you, then it's definitely something to work on, and you have to find somebody that's going to help you do that in a way that isn't always 100% comfortable.
Yeah, beautiful. So slowing it down, having some conversations, bringing some questions, and bringing a real topic to get an experience of being coached by them on it. Yeah,
totally.
Thank you.
It's now a bad time to tell you that I struggle with perfectionism, Katie.
Me too, Sam.
Really? Weird. Oh, cool. Next. Yeah, I think that is such a good point. And I think there's something else you shared in there as well, because obviously when we're looking to have a coach, what you shared was, and get some experience. Have I had enough of an experience with this person that's moved me in a way that I really know on a deeper level that I want to work with this person, or these people, obviously with us too. But you also shared, like, am I being the coach that I need to be to get the most from this conversation? And I love that, because it's not just about the coach, right? It's about the coachee. Are you being the coachee you need to be to get the most from this coaching? I love that you shared that. I think that's such an important point.
Yeah, totally. And I think obviously you might not feel it initially. You might not want to turn up at the first meeting and be like, oh my God, I've had the worst day and this is why, here's all of my stuff. Some people might be like that. That's brilliant, like, good for them, but I'm not. But I think as you get along in that relationship, my other piece of advice would be, don't cancel on the days you want to cancel, because they're the days where you actually get the best stuff done. Like, the best work comes from the sessions that you least want to turn up to. At least that's my experience. Because when I've shown up to sessions where I've just been like, I am not in the right headspace for this, unpacking why I'm not in the right headspace, or what's created that mood or that feeling, that's been the kind of light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, it makes it real, right?
Yes.
What's present now, let's go there.
Mm-hmm.
That for me, Katie, when I think about you, it's one of the things that stands out the most, is just that willingness to keep looking, like real ownership. I want to look, I want to see it. That's a dark corner, I want to shine some light in it. It's phenomenal. Yeah.
I have one more question for you, Katie.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Let's go. Yes, I promised I'll behave. I'll be good.
Did you prefer me or Lisa?
Oh no. Sorry, it's a bad connection. I didn't hear that.
I wanted to draw out because I think a lot of people will relate to this as well. When we met you, and still to some extent now, it's like you are someone who has a busy schedule. And when we met, you were growing a practice. You were in a really busy period. You work in the global events industry. It was incredibly intense industry when an event is running. So you were working a full-time job with long hours. You were completing your master's degree. So there were lots of, I think your expression was, there's a few plates spinning.
Yeah.
So there was an absolutely jam-packed schedule. And we bump into people all the time. Like, I work full time and I wish that I didn't work so that I could spend more hours in my business. And what would you say to anyone? Because you've had to learn in a way to be patient with yourself. And this idea of the perfectionist, I should be able to do all of this and add another plate and have it look this way. So what really helped you when you were bumping into, this is my schedule and this is how it looks, and given these are my circumstances, what do I want to create? What helped you be patient with yourself, be loving with yourself, change your relationship with that busy schedule?
I think you used the phrase earlier, Lisa, and it was just slowing down. I think when you get used to having a jam-packed schedule, you get used to always feeling like you should be busy, like you should be running around at 100 miles an hour and then crashing into bed absolutely exhausted. And actually, if you slow it down and you look at, kind of zoom out and have that helicopter view of what life looks like, you find these pockets of time that maybe you weren't conscious of. And then, in all full disclosure, they're normally the pockets of time where you've spent 30 minutes going down an Instagram rabbit hole because you saw somebody wearing a particular shirt, and then you try and find out where that shirt is from, and then you're just lost for 30 minutes, and then you're like, where did those minutes go? Or cat videos, that's another one. Another confession is cat videos was often where my 30 minutes went. But if you slow down and actually think consciously, even if you took a week and went, right, this week I'm actually going to log absolutely everything I've done in my waking hours to see where that time is going, you find these little pockets. And then if the coaching practice or whatever it is that you want your life to look like, you start going, well, rather than watching cat videos for 30 minutes, what could I do that's going to help me be the person I want to be in this version, in this vision that I have? And I think slowing down and thinking about that, slowing down and thinking about what is that vision, and is it a 12-month vision? Is it a 5-year vision? What's the timescale that I'm willing to put on this to get to that place and be the version of me I want to be? Then you can start going, okay, well, if it's a year's time, how do I do that now? Like, what's the first little thing that I can do in the 30 minutes I have on a Wednesday morning that I'm always free? And is it just connecting with someone or talking to someone or reaching out to other coaches? I think taking the time to consider both what the vision is and what you're doing now, and then figuring out how the two can meet in the middle really helps. And on top of that, if you are someone like me that has all those plates spinning, letting one of those plates not spin for a while is actually really uncomfortable, but really rewarding. So I think that's also something that was a massive learning curve for me, that it's okay to not always be totally jam-packed, chock-a-block busy, and that actually having free time is brilliant. You rediscover skills or just experiences of even feeling. For me, it's feeling that creativity. Now that I have a little bit of time in my schedule on certain days, it's almost like my brain knows that time is coming, and that's when I have all these like really brilliant, like creative thoughts, like madly scribbling them down and trying to remember them all. So yeah, slow down to speed up, right?
Yeah, and that's an expression that we use a lot, people in our world use a lot, and often it's misunderstood, I think, by a lot of people who live in the fast lane, and they're like, well, does that mean that I just have to sit on the sofa and do nothing then? I think it's misunderstood. And there's a practicality in what you just shared, Katie, that's going to really serve people. So anyone who has a story of I don't have time, there's something in here for you. And just that, first of all, that check-in with like, what is the data feed that's running my system? So I have a view about success and being busy that looks like this. And of course, if I don't start to sit with that and question it, it is going to shape my behavior, and the result of this operating the system this way is a busy schedule. And at some points, an overcrammed schedule. Mm-hmm. And so that's beautiful inner work, an invitation to some inner work. And then the practicality of taking a check in terms of what's my story about where my time is going versus getting really clear on where is my time going. Because those two things can be so different, what we tell ourselves versus what's actually happening. And then that commitment to, how do I want to use this time? And I can choose to be focused and pay attention to the if I only have 30 minutes, that's it, then I want to be laser focused on the activity that is going to make a difference, not the busy work. And so it can really, actually having limited time can really serve people if they choose to operate that way.
Yeah.
So there's just so much richness in what you just shared. Thank you. Sam's sitting back in his chair like he's already finished.
Yeah, see you later. There's just so much in this, there's so much richness in this conversation, so much richness. And I've written something down, Katie. It's so funny because I was thinking, when you have like unintended consequences or unintended results in things, like we've spoken about it this morning. And one of the things I wrote down was, 4 things actually in what you shared and what you've really mastered, like to really see that you've mastered this and to share it with everybody, because I think this is super helpful. It was helpful to me, and I was sitting here thinking, wow, I wonder if Katie knows about this, so I'm going to share it. But it's kind of like a 4-step instruction manual for any coach, right? And step 1 is awareness of I can change and how am I currently operating?
Mm-hmm.
So do that first. I have an awareness, because you can't do anything without the awareness. And I love that you shared that. Step 2, and you asked such a beautiful question, creativity. How do I want it to be? Like, love that. And then 3, and this is what one of the things I love about you is willingness. Willingness to look and willingness to act. Just phenomenal. And the last one, which again, this is where we get to play, is the practice. Step 4, practice, get messy, keep going, come back again, have another look at it, and just stay in the game. So I want to share that with you, because you've inadvertently created a 4-step coaching instruction manual for the coaches out there listening to this. You can patent it, it's fine, you copyright it, I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
But it's Katie, just so for me, it just sums up you and our experience of you so far in our world and in the school, and I'm sure the other coaches in the school too. And I want to offer that to you, because it's just wow and phenomenal.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be patenting that after this call.
I'll only take 50%.
I think one of the other things you just mentioned that's probably we've not talked about a lot, but it's been really important in all of this, is those other coaches. Because I think sitting in a room with, virtually obviously, but sitting in a room with people who operate essentially on paper under the same title, they are doing the same thing, they are all coaching other people, but they do it in such different ways and from such a different place, is so incredible. It's so fascinating to work with or to listen to people who look at things in such a different way to how you look at it. And in terms of doing that thing of like looking at it and being like, not even how do I want it to be, but how could it be if I didn't do it the way I always do it, and hearing that 4 different ways is just really interesting for you to then take away and go, actually, I don't want to do it any of those ways. I want to do it this way, which is still different to how I was doing. But it's fascinating to learn about all those other ways of doing and being. That's just really supportive and loving and beautiful. So you feel like you can share really vulnerable stuff in a really safe space, but also just really interesting from a forensic anthropologic kind of look at how weird and wonderful humans are. They do it in so many different creative ways. So that's something that's been massive as well.
It's something that I'm super passionate about, like being in a community that serves. And there's an infinite level of creativity inside of us. And I really resonate with what you're sharing about being in an environment, being open to different points of view, different perspectives, different ways of doing things, and not needing to be right, not needing it to be my way is the best way, which can be hard for a perfectionist, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome that you've shared that. It really lands with me. And I find as well in communities, and I was actually sharing this with Sam yesterday, if other people speak, something ignites inside of me and my ideas then elevate. It's like the flames just get turned up. And it's really cool to be in an environment that, you know, something incredible is going to come from that if I just settle my mind and get present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. That's a really good way of looking at it.
Thank you so much, Katie, for your time. So acknowledge you for the work that you've done. For you're already signed up for next year's school, so you're already showing like I'm this person. I'm creating myself as someone who is already investing in myself for next year, and that can create a shift inside of us now. So we start to be different now, knowing that that's who we are. So just so much love for you, so much appreciation for you. And I'm really excited for anyone who has a conversation with you, because their world will be changed as a result.
Thanks, guys. It's been awesome talking to you this morning.